With our unit of identification with the owls, I start out with indicating the size disparity because size is a very important feature for identification. I'm going to do likewise for the daytime birds of prey. Remember, we are in kingdom Animalia, we are in phylum Chordata, we are in class Aves, we are in several different orders. Cathartiformes, Accipitriformes, for instance, Falconiformes. So these are orders that have been dictated and promulgated, published by the American Ornithologist Unit, because that's a taxonomy we're going to use in this class, Raptor Ecology 477. So from a size standpoint, you bet, daytime birds of prey come in a variety of sizes. You've got massive or huge daytime birds of prey like this immature bald eagle. And by the way, bald eagles are an aquatic eagle. They lack feathers on their tarsi down here by the toes. Golden eagles have feathers all the way down to their toes. So that's always a good way to tell them apart. If this was an adult bald eagle, of course they have a white head and have a white tail. But when it's an immature bird, some people might confuse them for a golden eagle. This is how you would absolutely be able to tell the difference. And of course there's some other things we'll talk about. Massive bird. This is a northern goshawk. This is categorically one of the world's larger hawks on the planet. Here's a crow-size or mid-size raptor, just so you have a feel for size. This is a broad-winged hawk, a fairly common breeder in the state. And then for small raptors, it would be things like a sharp-shinned hawk. This is a female. And breeding in the city of Stevens Point and started showing up in 2008 is a Merlin. And of course, American Kessels are small. So small, medium size, big, and really big eagles. So when I refer to size, it gives you some feel when I invoke a medium size or big, which I think is an important feature. All right, so let's hit the most specious members of the raptors on the planet Earth, the daytime birds of prey, who outnumber by a little over 100 more. Are their daytime birds of prey versus that of the owls. The genus Accipiter is one of the most species-rich genera in all of the birds of prey, both nocturnal and diurnal birds. And we are represented here in North America, lucky us, by 3 that probably evolved in forested habitats. We know that because they have relatively long tails and they have relatively short rounded wings. But this is a goshawk. This is a medium-sized accipiter. This is a Cooper's hawk. It's crow-size. And then this is a sharpshin. I know I just went over size, but I want you to notice the size disparity. Without question, some claim one of the most difficult 2 species of all of the birds in North America to separate reliably is a sharpshin from a Cooper's hawk because they look so similar. As similar as they look, I want you to know molecularly, Cooper's hawks and goshawks are more closely related to each other than either one is to this species. And in fact, I, with a team of researchers, and one of them, alum Dr. Sarah Sonshagen, we recently published a paper that showed the very first ever, to my knowledge, certainly in the Western Hemisphere, probably the planet, hybridization between 2 accipiters. Yes, they will hybridize by falconers in captivity, but a natural hybrid between a Cooper's hawk and a goshawk. And we know from the genetic analysis that the sire was a Cooper's hawk and the mom was a goshawk. And before I move on to the taxonomy, etc., I just want you to know we do have a vulture in our collection. I wanted you to see the size of them. And one of the things that should strike you immediately, in my opinion, besides it being very big, is how long its wings are. Accipiters, forest hawks tend to have short wings. The tips of their feathers do not extend down to the outer reaches of the length of their tail feathers. That is exactly what you see on folded wings, for instance, on this species. And when you've got long wings, that means they must be soaring birds rather than flapping power flyers like the genus Accipiter. So this gives you a good idea of the size and why it might be a little tough, and for some people, probably almost impossible to separate some of these species. All right, so now we're going to do the daytime birds of prey, as I indicated. Once again, we're following the American Ornithologist Union checklist of birds, 7th edition with updates, which you can find readily if you Google AOU on the website. And we have 3 daytime orders here, the Cathartiformes, Accipitriformes, and Falconiformes. Accipitriformes is by far the most speciose taxonomic grouping. Cathartiformes are the New World vultures. Just so you know, there are about 25 species of vultures in the world, and we here in the Western Hemisphere have several species, and one that we find regularly in Wisconsin. In fact, none of the others occur in Wisconsin. Although at one time, the California condor undoubtedly ranged through here, but not by the time the European colonists reached the continent. If you exhibit social or individual behavioral catharsis, you are cleansing yourself, you're cleaning yourself of something, you're shedding something to be cathartic. Ergo, the term or the prefix cathart in Cathartiformes, vultures are cleansers of the environment, and that's where that word comes from. The New World vultures contain like the Andean condor and the California condor, and I have one species in the family Cathartidae for you guys to know for full credit this semester, and that's the turkey vulture. This is a big bird of prey, but these guys are predominantly scavengers. So they have reduced size to their talons, and their behavioral aggressiveness isn't nowhere near of the strong killing motivation behavior that you would see with the other birds of prey, including owls that take live prey. And I don't mean to suggest for a moment that turkey vultures can't take live prey. They do on occasion. You can sometimes see them out in fields after a farmer has gone through the field, and they will take grasshoppers. They might even eat a snake or even a small mammal, but predominantly they are going after dead prey. And one of the reasons we know that is because you typically see them associated with carcasses that aren't moving. And they also have one of the biggest nostrils in all of class Aves, a perforated nostril with a large opening, and they have one of the largest, proportionately speaking, lobes, olfactory lobes in their brain, which allows them to process. Of course, you don't really smell with your nose, you smell with your brain. You don't see with your eyes, you actually see with your brain. So, the turkey vulture has a reddish colored head as an adult, but in its first year of life, it has a gray-brown or gray head. And once again, you have age specificness. I talk a little bit about that in the owls, at the close of the owl unit for identification. Basically a black bird with gray secondaries, primaries, and rectrices or tail feathers. Fairly long tail feathers, I might add. The head is naked. It's not completely so. It's not as if there aren't some feathers on her, but they're rudimentary in their length. And the reason for vultures either to have the head lacking feathers or the head and neck lacking feathers, in this case it's basically just the head, is so that when they stick their head into guts, bacteria-filled, if you will, carcass that could be sitting there for days and maybe weeks, the bacteria is exposed to solar radiation, and that'll tend to not allow it to be viable. So this is actually a hygienic component, which secondarily, of course, you can color it. And turkeys and some other species of birds, and in fact some other vultures, color naked parts where there isn't plumage to convey information perhaps about their status or their individual status for that matter. This is an animal that exhibits a very low wing loading. I talk about in the owl unit where line-eared owls and short-eared owls have a very large surface area relative to the mass of their body or their weight. This is the poster child for low wing loading. So much so when you see a turkey vulture flying, and they are a soaring bird with long wings, relatively wide, so they're not flappers predominantly. And because they weigh so little, they can almost effortlessly move about both vertically and horizontally, especially during warmed air currents during the day, which allow them to minimize energy expenditure and maximize energy, if you will, savings. So this is a very adaptive feature of any low wing-loaded bird. Easy bird to identify in many respects because the head doesn't look that big, and it's not because the head isn't big. The head is actually relatively large. It lacks feathers, and it makes the head look much smaller than it would be otherwise. Vultures are typically social birds the world over, And the reason for that is because they aggregate at carcasses. And no surprise that they have long bills that are sharp. Mine. Gulls, likewise, have very long, sharp bills. When you aggregated a carcass, you would be at a disadvantage to have a short bill that wouldn't be very sharp, because you would not be able to tear food as readily off of the carcass. And by the way, not only tear it off, swallow it as fast as you can, because somebody, mine, will pull that food right out of your gullet if it can. And that's standard for vultures. Easy bird to identify. Don't forget that you're in a different order, Cathartiformes, and you're in the family Cathartidae, and the genus species is Cathartisaura. And notice that you have to be able to tell me whether you're looking at an immature bird, i.e. it lacks a red head, or an adult, which has a red head. And this is clearly an adult bird. And the carcass that we started this unit moments ago was an immature turkey vulture, and it didn't have a red head. These guys are ground nesters. They will sometimes nest on the floor of a deserted, destroyed building, but not uncommon in talus slopes, the fallen rock off a cliff that makes cavities, and then they nest in there. Youngsters will tend to have, as is true of so many birds, white plumage, but they can be entrapped by being in that cavity if a predator finds that nest. And so they have an unusual anti-predator behavior when they are found in the nest. The youngsters will puke up their guts, and they will lie down in it and be relatively still. I have not experienced it. I have no desire to do so, but I have been told by a number of vulture researchers that turkey vulture puke is absolutely just it'll put you down. The smell is just acute, and a strong adaptive feature for a cavity nest you might track. This is a bird that appears to be changing its distribution as humans have populated and expanded urbanization, and the refuse and garbage and roadkills of the cars that interact with mammals that don't make it across the road. This is an animal that has benefited from those aspects of human intrusions into virtually all of the landscapes on the planet Earth. Turkey vultures appear to be doing quite well. And then we enter the order Accipitriformes, the hawks, eagles, the kites, and as I also stated in the owl unit, we are going to emphasize Wisconsin birds of prey. They're relatively rich. There's about 44, 45 species of birds of prey recognized as breeding birds in North America. And so we have a pretty healthy representative list for you guys between both the daytime birds of prey and the nocturnal. We are in family Accipitridae, and please do not be confused with my colloquial invocation of the following terminology. It is convention among raptors, and it is raptor speak to refer to a number of birds of prey as being, oh, those are the accipiters. And you might think, logically, that if somebody says, oh, that's an accipiter, that they're referring to any of the members of Accipitridae, and you would be wrong. When somebody actually says accipiter, an informed scholar or a birder, they are specifically referring here in North America, or in Wisconsin, of course, to the three members who have that genus accipiter. So it's either going to be a northern goshawk, a Cooper's hawk, or a sharp-shinned hawk. So that potentially could confuse you. Don't let it. It happens to be colloquial speak, so keep that in mind. I will do my best to be as clerically accurate on your behalf as I possibly can be. The first one indicated here is the northern goshawk. It is the only of these three species of accipiter that is whole Arctic in its distribution. So, and in fact, what's interesting about this, well, there's several things that are interesting about this bird, but of recent change in natural history is the stretching of the niche of northern goshawk. It's typically here in North America, a bird associated with boreal forests, so coniferous forests, and some mixed forests, as here in Wisconsin. But this is a bird in Eurasia that has moved into cities. So for instance, the city of Hamburg, Germany, which is a metro area, there's like over 100 territories of goshawks in the city. I just refereed a paper for an international journal of the breeding success of urban goshawks in Tokyo, Japan. And they also have a lot of territories of the bird. They feed on pigeons and bigger birds. And in fact, accipiters tend to be bird chasing, bird eating raptors. And of course, there's a little bit of variation. This is the big accipiter here in northern North America, and it's a big accipiter in Eurasia. Northern goshawks, Accipiter gentilis, have this blue-gray back as adults, and they are brown as youngsters, and you have to know immature versus adult. The white line associated with mostly above the eye is a supercilium line. In the 3 accipiters that you guys have, only the northern goshawk has the white supercilium line in adult plumage above the eye. Now, admittedly, even some youngsters or birds of the year, this bird is in its first year of life, has a bit of a light line or supercilium line above its eye. But please take note, I'm going to repeat this. Only as an adult does Accipiter gentilis of these 3 accipiters have a very obvious supercilium line. And again, it has gray plumage on its back, which will be true of all 3 of the accipiters when they're adults. And they will all have some barring on their chest, but it's more minimal on a goshawk. And they will have vertical, I'm being redundant, streaking means vertical. As youngsters in their first year of life, Coopers, Sharpshin, and goshawks will have brown streaking, and they will have brown backs. They will have yellow eyes. Adult accipiters in the Western Hemisphere, here in North America, which is where they're essentially restricted, they will have orange or red eyes. All 3 accipiters. I need to say that again. As adults, the 3 accipiters will have orange or red eyes. Don't trick yourself up, so to speak, and overlook very obvious features, for instance, when it comes to an exam, or more importantly, when you're trying to identify a bird in a field. Here's an adult goshawk on the left-hand side. You can see the barring throughout the ventrum here. You can see the white supercilium line above the eye. And they also have a dark eye line just beneath that. Orange or red eye. And they have blue-gray in their back. And these are actually a dark gray to black barring, but it's relatively thin in adult northern goshawks. I will tell you there's a sex difference. It's an advanced characteristic, but females tend to have wider barring, and males tend to have thinner barring on their underside. Here's an immature bird, yellow eyes, brown on back, and some brown streaking. Also, what you'll notice on immature goshawks is they have bicolored covert feathers. Covert feathers spelled C-O-V-E-R-T. They cover the body. They're not flight feathers. They will be bicolored in many immature daytime birds of prey. Will be a light kind of tip on the feather versus a darker interior, which I can see a bit here on that bird's wrist, the bird's right wrist. Long tails, and accipiters tend to have long toes because they try to grab agile, flying prey birds. Standard fare. Northern goshawks breed in the state of Wisconsin, really through the upper 2/3 of the state. Howsoever, it's really a bird of more of the northern third of the state. Smaller than the goshawk and more closely related to it molecularly and behaviorally is the Cooper's hawk. Now, the next 2 species are blue-gray on their backs as adults. When they reach their 2nd summer of life, they convert from that brown plumage into adult plumage, and they will acquire in the 2nd summer, when they're 1 year of age, they will acquire horizontal barring, which is redundant, but I just want to make sure you have that. And it'll be a brownish color, as you can see here. Goshawks tend to have black barring as adults. Cooper's hawks and Sharpshins will have brown barring. Cooper's hawks will tend to have rounded shaped tails. Sharpshins will tend to have squared off tails. Cooper's hawks will tend to have more white at the terminus or at the end of the tips of the rectrices or the tail feathers. Sharpshins will have a much more reduced amount of white there. Will have a much more reduced amount of white. Also for an advanced characteristic, Coopers tend to have proportionally bigger heads than Sharpshins, so they have a larger head projecting ahead of the front and leading edge of the wing. I am going to highlight this several times. Coopers and Sharpshins are, for many birders, a nightmare, to be perfectly blunt about it, to separate them, because they are so similar, again, in morphology, color, etc. And of course, that's what we're emphasizing. Vocalizations are easy to separate. I'm not holding you for those. I don't teach those things. But visually, oh my gosh, you are in good company if you struggle, especially with Coopers versus Sharpies. This is a Sharpshin hawk. They're much smaller, about the size of your hand. This is an adult, and this is a bird of the year. In fact, these are birds on a fall migration. Adult, orange or red eyes. Again, immature Sharpshin. See the bicoloration on the coverts? And in fact, in Sharpies, it tends to be a cinnamon tip to the coverts, and then obviously this brown color otherwise. Yellow eyes. Yes, Sharpies in their immature plumage can tend to have a white supercilium line, and you might think, hey, did you say goshawks have a white supercilium? As adults. As adults, goshawks. So don't confuse yourself. Sharp-shinned hawks tend to have a relatively uniform amount of dark blue-gray going from the top of their head all the way back on the nape of the neck. Cooper's hawks tend to have a cap here. It doesn't go all the way down the back side of the head. It tends to be restricted if you go to the top of the head. Excellent view of two age differences, which you guys are responsible for. And of course, size matters to help you distinguish amongst these birds. These are sharp-shinned hawks. These are a mated pair of sharp-shinned hawks. And again, heads of Sharpies are proportionally smaller. That can make the eyes look relatively bigger. Look at this male. His feathers are ruffled up a bit, but I assure you he has brown barring here on the underside. This is a female in her very first chance to breed, her second summer, when she's 1 year of age. She's a yearling, or some would say she's in her second year, an SY bird, in her second year of life. She's 1 year of age, and she's breeding at the very first chance she can. We talk about this, or I do, under reverse size dimorphism, for instance, as a lecture module. She's getting some barring because she's molting out her immature plumage, and of course she has her vertical streaking. So her eyes is changing colors. Sharpies, the majority of their diet is birds, and they have very relatively long and thin toes, and they are very fast. Accipiters have long tails, short rounded wings. They're sprint flyers. They're not soaring raptors. They sit and wait for a bird to expose itself. And these guys over short distances, all three accipiters, are very, very fast. But over long distances, not the case. Look at how big the eyes again are on this male relative to the size of the head. We never see that kind of relativity of eye size to the head if it was a Cooper's hawk, for instance. And again, this is a mating pair. The next species on your list is the Northern Harrier. The Northern Harrier is still in the family Accipitridae, and there's been a genus species change on this bird. Actually, it's more the specific change. If you have a field guide, unless you have an absolutely brand new one that I'm unaware of, you would probably have the genus species as Circus cyaneus. It's been changed from cyaneus to Hudsonicus. The Northern Harrier has been changed to Circus hudsonicus, and you are responsible for separating adult male from female. That may seem like it's a big challenge. I think you'll find it not that challenging. Harriers are brown nesting birds. The word harrier means it's from a verb, to harry back and forth. They have very long wings, so don't think of them necessarily as spring flyers. They're soaring birds. They also have long tails, and you might think, oh, that long tail must be for a rudder to go through a forest, and you'd be wrong. The long tail helps give them lift and agility. They fly and harry above the culms or the stems of grass, for instance, because it's a grassland hunting bird and nesting bird. And this large surface area of the flight feathers minimize energy expenditure. This long tail gives them agility. They also have very long legs to reach into that grassy type of habitat to go after their predominant prey, which is small mammals. They have a bit of a facial disc, which we know through experimentation allows them to funnel sound like the owls do. And this bird, unlike so many of the birds of prey of the world, exhibits an unusual social system of mating compared to most other birds, and for that matter, birds of prey. It's polygynous. Poly, P-O-L-Y, and G-Y-N-O-U-S. One word, no hyphen, polygynous, P-O-L-Y-G-Y-N-O-U-S. One male simultaneously mated to several females, and you can refer to that group of females as being a harem. It is also unusual in this regard. It exhibits sexual dichromatism between the sexes. Most raptors are monochromatic between the genders, between the sexes. Not this species, as you're about to see. Also, you have one other daytime bird of prey that is exhibiting of sexual dichromatism. That'll be the American kestrel, a small falcon. Grassland nester, in trouble in many areas in North America, evidence suggests. Conversion of agriculture. Grasslands to agricultural systems is a major habitat degradation construct in regard to their viability. Seem to be holding their own here in central Wisconsin, for instance in the Buena Vista Marsh, who benefit from the grassland management on behalf of greater prairie chickens. These guys are inadvertent beneficiaries of that, if you will, degradation and maintenance of reducing the amount of woody cover. Microtus pennsylvanicus, the meadow vole, but it also takes small birds, and especially nesting birds during the breeding season. Females will have a brown color from their first summer life through the rest of their lives. But males in their first year will look similar to this too in terms of color. So that can be a bit confusing. So let's take a look at some other slides. Here's an adult male northern harrier. He's got a little spotting on his chest, which isn't unusual, but when you see an adult male harrier who has gone into, at the end of his second summer of life, so he's 1 year of age, he will have molted all of his brown plumage, like the color we saw in the previous slide, and he will have acquired a very light color underneath, almost white, and it will tend to accentuate the terminal black or melanism, called melanism you see here, melanism right here. And his back, the upper side, is going to be blue-gray, more toward the gray end, actually way more toward the gray end. And he will exhibit an eye color change. He will go from a darker brown, not real dark brown, but a lighter color of brown, to actually yellow as an adult, whereas a female will maintain a brown eye color basically throughout her life. Might get a little darker as she gets older. Harriers have long tails, as indicated. It gives them lift and it gives them agility. They also have something always, never, don't, not, and that is this. They have what is called, the conventional speak, is a white rump patch. Let me be very clear. These are not tail feathers. These are covert feathers that lie over the proximate, if you will, connecting part of these tail feathers with the rump. They are always there. Doesn't matter the sex, and it doesn't matter the age. And because they fly relatively low, when you see them, this is something you will get to see. And even if they're up high, if they're banking on a turn, you can look for this. That profile of a long tail and long wings will aid you in identifying these birds. This is a bird in its first year of life, and I can see some bicoloration on its coverts. It's clearly in its first fall migration, and there's some other things that tell me that. But a good look. The tips of the wings are cut off, clearly a northern harrier. I can also see a little bit of a lighter color on the edge of the facial disc on this. Here's a slide that shows the sexual dichromatism between these two birds. Their sexes, of course, are different. Notice the white rump patch. Doesn't matter the sex, doesn't matter the age. Look at the long tail. Brown bird below. Admittedly, males and females look this color in their first year, so you'd have a heck of a time separating them, although males are markedly smaller. And then here's that blue-gray, really more towards the gray end of the spectrum, lighter colored eye of the male. So it's really easy to distinguish between the two. Why is there sexual dichromatism in Circus hudsonicus? Well, that's a very good question. Let me answer that for you on a speculative basis. Because if you have the ability to actually court several females simultaneously, shouldn't you have something flashy to be able to pull in so many different females? Possible. I don't know that for sure. Reasonable. Here's the facial disc. Streaky colored yellow eyes of this adult male, northern harrier. And I cannot overemphasize this. In the owl identification unit, I emphasize, especially for longers and shorters, and I did so with turkey bullets, how low wing loaded they are. Oh my gosh. Harriers are exceedingly buoyant on the wing. They are so light while in flight. And that's because they exhibit incredibly low wing loading. They look like butterflies. And in the spring, when they're in courtship, males have this phenomenal aerial display of going up and down in these great big huge W's or U's and trying to impress, if you will, females. Perhaps send a signal to another male. Am I not the best dancer on the marsh? Harriers are svelte in their body form. They are elongated in their body. These are all females. They have darker eyes. That's how I know that. You can see the edge of the facial disc. These birds on the outer edges are birds in their first fall migration. This is an older female. She's at least 2 years of age. Males would look like this in their first year of life, but they would have lighter brown eyes than what we see here. Females will have a darker eye in the first year of life. Elongated body plan, long legs, narrow chest region, long wings, long tail. And then we get into the bootios, the soaring hawks of, generally speaking, open settings, grasslands, or at least a little more reduced amount of wooded habitat. Long, wide wings, and a short, round tail. This is a red-tailed hawk, but more importantly, guys, it is the quintessential outline. Just forget the color. This is the outline of the bootios of the planet Earth. We're still in the family Accipitridae, and you have 4 bootios. 3 of them breed in the state of Wisconsin. This guy certainly does very commonly. 1 does not, but it is a bird that is here every year. In fact, for quite a few months. It's the rough-legged hawk. So far, all of the species that I've talked about, except for the northern goshawk, are predominantly Western hemispheric birds. But the rough-legged hawk, the first member of your buteo list, buteo is in accord with, from Eurasia they use the word buzzard. In fact, I talk about the common buzzard in our discussion of what was it? It's in the lecture module I closed. Oh, I know. It's in when we're talking about floaters. The common buzzard is our analog to our red-tailed hawk. It's very common throughout Europe, And just as our red tail is one of the most common and easily identified birds of prey, and easily often spotted because it's out in the open, unlike a lot of the other birds that are forest-oriented. Rough-legged hawks, red-shouldered hawks, broad-winged hawks, all have the same general outline. They are soaring birds. They are not the sprint flyers, and they're not the low wing-loaded birds, generally, for instance, of a harrier. And I don't mean to suggest they're all heavy wing-loaded, but they're not as low wing-loaded as, for instance, owls. Many of the owls are, and certainly not to the extent the northern harrier is. This is one of the world's, by the way, many of the bootios make up and comprise some of the world's biggest hawks. Soaring raptors, soaring birds, but especially soaring raptors, because this is a raptor college, of course, have slotted, this is the language, this is the speak, they have slotted primaries. The accipiters tend to have only like 3 slots because they're not soaring raptors. Bootios tend to have like about 5 or 4 slots. Turkey vultures have slotted primaries also, to allow the air to move through their outstretched wings, but they try not to flap because flapping is expensive, energetically expensive, and the slotting tends to reduce turbulence to let the air move through and not create eddies of turbulence at the tips of their wings. Accipiters don't need all that slotting because they're spring flyers and they don't use much soaring. This is a rough-legged hawk, and they are named rough-legged hawk because they have, and you have 2 daytime birds of prey that have feathers that go all the way to the toes. Only 2 in your list. Rough-legged hawk, spelled R-O-U-G-H, and it's because the feathers will go all the way down to the base of the toes. And the only other daytime bird of prey we have that has that kind of a construct on their legs is a golden eagle. So they share that feature. Rough-legged hawks, in fact, bootios, are notorious, and I get to use that. They're infamous for having a lot of melanism among individuals or in some populations. A polymorphic construct, if you will. Polymorphism, many different forms. But this is the general form of a rough-legged hawk, the typical color that you will see. Let me go through some things. They have a bicolored ventrum. They're light above, light brown, very light brown. And they have a continuous belly band. They have wrist patches, these polygons out here. They tend to have a bicolored tail, light proximate means close to the body, and dark distally. White, light colored proximate, dark distally. They have black wrist marks, or patagial marks, P-A-T-A-G-I-A-L. P-A-T-A-G-I-A-L, patagial marks. This is the bird's wrist right here, and they are in accord with such. Bicolored tail. Bootios tend to have blockish-sized bodies, squared, relatively large heads, short, rounded tails, long, wide wings for soaring. They don't need a long tail as a rudder because they're not typically found in forest settings. This is called a rough-legged buzzard in Eurasia, because it's whole Arctic in its distribution. It's a tundra nesting, ground nesting, and cliffs. And cliff really is a ground, it's just vertical. And it tends to lack barring, especially in its secondaries, and it doesn't have a humeral mark, H-U-M-E-R-A-L. There's a humerus bone, a humeral mark, H-U-M-E-R-A-L. Red-tailed hawks, who are almost identical in size. The 2 bootios that are identical in size are the rough-legged and red-tail. The first 2 bootios on your list, as I recall. Red-tails will always have a humeral mark in here when you can see color on the wing like this. This can't be a red-tail. It's a light brown color and there's no humeral mark, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Big black patches there in the wings. This is your standard rough-legged hawk color. Bootios tend to have light brown or brown eyes. Very light eye actually in their first year of life, but they get brown eyes. They do not get orange or red eyes. So you shouldn't confuse them with an accipiter. polymorphism, i.e. melanism, is common in the genus Boodio. Squared off heads, as I told you, is common. Boodios tend to have blocky chests or bodies. They have long, wide wings. These are both rough-legged hawks. They both have these markings. They have no humeral mark here, as a red tail will have. They have a contiguous dark belly band and a light-colored upper chest. But this bird has more melanin in it. Has more melanin. Why that's so is a very good question, because you can actually find color variation within a brood, within the same nest. Feathers go right down to the toes. There's actually some feathers right in here. And by the way, feet on rough-legged hawks for this size of a bird, it's one of the world's bigger hawks. Feet are actually quite little. They take lemmings and small mammals. Red tails have much bigger feet. Small farm children, dogs, cats, small SUVs. Those are all kinds of things that need to hide from red tails. I'm kidding. Am I? Red tails can take bigger prey, and Bootios tend to have short toes, thick toes that can withstand being bit by those sharp, long incisors that you find on rodents, which is a major order rodentia that is hit hard, if you will, by the Bootios. Soaring raptors. Rough-legged hawks overwinter every year into the upper third or quarter of the United States, the contiguous 48 U.S. states, but in summertime, they're up north breeding. The latest I've ever seen a rough-legged hawk, I remember my girlfriend and I were driving back from Pack or something, and we saw a rough-legged hawk on June 29th, as I recall, something like that. Amazing. I figured that bird must have been in trouble. Rough-legged hawks tend to have a bicolored tail, light above and a dark distal area, band, as you can see here. This is a rough-leg, it's got a little bit different color going on. This is probably a male. Males do tend to have more banding where the barring starts. It's not 100% accurate, but it's mostly accurate. Dark brown eyes, especially older Bootios. Here's a red-tailed hawk. Look at the slotting of those primaries, soaring. This is an adult who's got a red tail, so he's at least made it through his second summer of life when he was 1. He has a belly band, but it's speckled. And he has a humeral mark ventrally here, in accord with where the humerus bone is in the forelimb, and our humerus bone is. Rough-legged hawks will never. This is a big hawk. Red tails, rough legs are two of the biggest kinds of hawks the world has. These are red tails. Look at the size of the head, squared off the look. This is an adult at the bottom and an immature on top. Red tails are endemic to North America, and they exhibit lots of color variations. They are very polymorphic, again, as are rough-legged hawks. They have a speckled belly band, not contiguous black like on a rough-legged. They always have a humeral mark. Immature bird, first fall migration. Adult bird made it past its second summer of life, probably farther. It's a very dark eye. Light color above. Adult red tails tend to get some cinnamon brown. I think it's sexy looking. Cinnamon brown tint to some of these covert feathers. Immature birds do not have such. Advanced characteristic. First year birds in their first year of life have a thin subterminal band right here. Adults have a thicker subterminal band. It is believed that immature birds make a trade-off. Get off the nest as fast as you can because nests are dangerous places. The number one reason nests go down in class avies is because of predation. Get the H off of your nest as fast as you can. Grow your feathers as fast as you can. Trade-off, grow fast feathers or grow feathers fast. They're not as strong. They're not as strong. Adults, experienced, and they have more integrity to their feathers. And by the way, if you did not know this, some of you may have taken me for ornithology. The more melanin, this is a structural pigment. This isn't from eating certain kinds of foods. The thicker that line is, the stronger those feathers are. More melanin, it's a stronger feather. And the converse is true. Lighter color, not as strong plumage. All other things being held equal. These legs will not be feathered down to the toes, and these are much bigger feet than what we see on a red shoulder. Look at the first year red tail, how light his eye is. Almost like a creamy white, but it'll fast change to a brown color even through its first wing. Color variation in the tail. Red tails are named for that on the right hand side. Here's an adult, and here's that sexy reddish tint. Like, God, I love these feathers, these culverts. God, that's neat looking. Red tail, signaling it's a sexually mature bird, territorial competitor. First year bird, camouflage, cheap feathers, loser, superior, inferior. Just get through that first year. Things will change, I know it. Lots of barring in the tail. Adult red tails tend to lose some of the barring once they're adults. Buteo jamaecensis is the pronunciation for the red tail. Buteo lagopus is the pronunciation for the rough-legged hawk. Melanism is common in the genus Buteo. This is a red tail. This is a this is a red tail also. These are both red tails. This is a commonly looking red tail in its first year of life. We don't have the red tail yet. Please take note of this. Red tails tend to have more banding, especially across the secondaries, whether they're melanistic, M-E-L-A-N-I-S-T-I-C, M-E-L-A-N-I-S-T-I-C, whether it's melanistic or just a normal non-melanistic bird, they will tend to have more barring. Rough-legged hawks will lack the barring on the underside here, especially in the secondaries. This is one sexy looking bird. This is a melanistic red tail. And look at how dark he is. And you can get him even blacker than this, like a black sheet. Look at all the barring in this red tail. Clearly an adult bird. I can see a naked leg here. Generally speaking, if you've got this nice red tail, of the birds you have in your list, you should have no problem identifying, even if it's a melanistic bird. This is Buteo jamaecensis. Breeds throughout the entire North America area. Breeds commonly in the state of Wisconsin, and one of the most commonly seen birds. Squared off head. That's an awfully light color eye for a red tail, and it is a red tail. So there's the red tail right there. Naked tarsus, tarsi, T-A-R-S-I plural, tarsus singular, T-A-R-S-U-S, the leg, which actually is the analog to your heel and your foot. It's not, this is not your tibia-fibia complex, this is the heel part of the leg. Look at how dark that bird is. Melanistic red tail. Buteo jamaecensis. Nests along the edge of woodlands, and sometimes into some woodlands. It's a soaring bird, and again, mostly a rodent eater, but it is pretty Catholic in its diet. Excellent comparative shot of a red tail versus a rough-legged hawk. Red tail, bigger feet, naked tarsi, smaller feet, feathers coming down to the base of the toes, humeral mark, red tail, lack of a humeral mark, rough-legged hawk. Polygon, wrist mark, lacking in the red tail. Lacking barring on the secondaries, far more barring in the red tail. Bigger feet, small feet, lack banding, patagial mark, humeral mark on the red tail, lacking on the rough-legged hawk. Much lighter color in the upper chest, contiguous belly band, speckled belly band. Very similar in size, but under normal colors of their plumage, they are, in my opinion, easy to separate under normal colors. This is a bird you want to keep. It's so gorgeous. Here is a partially melanistic red tail, and the partial melanism is expressed in the tail. You usually don't see something like that. That is an uncommon bird, probably more of a western species. California up to the Pacific Northwest, this is something we don't see very often in Wisconsin, except in the fall. In the fall, we get a concentration of filtering of red tails from a variety of places, especially out west and even the far northwest, that come through Wisconsin. If you ever have a chance to be down in Arkansas, southern Missouri, and down into Texas in the wintertime, you can see some phenomenal polymorphism of red tails. Birds from different places of northern latitudes that tend to be overwintering in some of the same places. Although I will tell you this, many adult red tails from far northern territories, many of them actually don't leave some of their territories in winter. In Wisconsin, we have lots of adult birds stand their sites all year long, and mostly the age class that's younger, the first year birds. That's how. Melanism. These are two different species of hawks. One's a red tail and one's a roughleg. Which is it? Which one lacks banding on the secondaries underneath? This one. This is a roughleg. This one has more banding. This is a melanistic red tail, and this is a melanistic roughleg. Never wear gloves when you are handling a bird of prey. And yet I'm wearing gloves. I'm wearing them because I just recently took our owl nets down. It was a cold morning. I'm wearing a down coat, and my hands are cold. I wear clown gloves when I take down these cold metal poles. When you are handling a bird of prey for direct, reliable contact, which is good for the bird and you, never wear gloves, ever. So shame on me, but somebody wanted to get a picture. Oh, it was me. I wanted a comparison shot for education. Squared off head, big heads and bootios, blockish sized bodies, similar in size to the world's biggest hawks. Neat picture. Draw that head. Ah, Jiminy crickets. Red tail or rough-legged hawk. Gotta be booty, short tail, long wings, quite wide. Boy, this is almost as black as they get. Gotta be rough leg. There's feathers all the way down to the toes. Done. Bootiolagopus. Gorgeous. Sexy bird. Accipitridae. Soaring hawk. Lays 2 to 4 eggs. Cliff nester and ground nester. Polarctically distributed. It's a much smaller bird. Half to a third of the size of a red-tailed hawk. Let me exemplify that. This is a red-tailed hawk. And this is a broadwing hawk. Look at how much smaller, but its outline is very similar. Broadwing hawk, Buteo. Platypterus means a broad wing, literally broadwing. Buteo means a buzzard-like hawk. Forget that the genus Buteo of the soaring hawks, which generally are open nesters, we have 2 exceptions now. We nest in forests, broadwings and red shoulders, have short, rounded tails, long, wide wings. In fact, this bird's specific name, genus means a buzzard or a hawk. Platypterus literally means broad wing. Has brown barring as an adult. And you are to know the difference between an adult and an immature, as with the red tail. You have 4 daytime birds of prey that will have brown barring. And I might as well list them for you right now. Cooper's hawk, sharp-shinned hawk, broadwing hawk, red-shouldered hawks. I'm going to say that one more time. You have 4 daytime birds of prey that have brown barring. They are Cooper's hawk, sharp-shinned, broadwing, and red-shoulder. 2 of those have orange or red eyes as adults. Coopers and Sharpies. Never orange or red eyes in Buteos, ever. So keep that straight, it'll help you with ID. Broadwings have a black, as adults, have a black and white barring to their tail. But typically 2 white bars are seen, and the most distal of the white bars is wide, almost as wide as the black bands. Why do I highlight that? Because adult red-shouldered hawks have black and white barring in their tail. Oh my. But red shoulders have you can usually see 3 to 4, usually 4 white bands, and they're way thinner compared to their dark bands. So, yep, black and white bands occur in 2 bootios, broadwings and red shoulders. But in broadwings, the most distal white band is almost as wide as black bands. That is never the case. Not ever in a red shoulder. Broadwing is the smallest of the bootios of the 4 you need to know, and it is about crow size. Red-shouldered hawks are intermediate in size between the red tail and the broadwing. So red shoulders are noticeably bigger than a red tail, but noticeably smaller than a red tail. Excuse me. Red shoulders are noticeably larger than a broadwing, but noticeably smaller than a red tail. I misspoke, so let me do it one more time. Red shoulders are noticeably larger than a broadwing and noticeably smaller than a red tail. Broadwings make a whistle when you're near their nest site. A high-pitched whistle, that's their defense call. Red tails, which you hear on TV quite a bit, even in science fiction movies. You can be on a different planet in a different universe, and you can hear a red tail in the background, which is really interesting. I didn't know they exhibited such a broad range. They have a big scream that they call. That's not even close to what it is, but broadwings have a whistle. Broadwings are very common in the state of Wisconsin, predominantly in the northern third of the state, but they actually breed throughout the state, but more common in the far north. One of the few carnivorous vertebrates that routinely eats Eastern American toads, which are usually shunned by most vertebrates because of the parotid glands and secretions that come from them. Anyone who has a dog owner knows this. Broadwings, and for that matter, red shoulders will eat toads. This is an adult broadwing. They will also take small mammals. Many hawks will add greenery or sprigs, S-P-R-I-G-S. We're not really sure the function of these things. There's some evidence to suggest it may be territorial signaling. This site's occupied, and it might function in such a manner. There's some that believe that the chemicals, as these leaves break down, reduce the amount of insect infestation to the nest proper. Irrespective, you see greenery on top of a stick nest like this, it is occupied. This adult broadwing hawk, look at that wide white band right here. As a small mammal, meadow vole, and here's one of the puppies. Brown barring as an adult, black and white tail. Very common bird. And it usually is found breeding in the city of Stevens Point. Blacker sized heads for bootios. Adult bird on the left. No orange or red eye, typically brown eyes in adult bootios. No humeral mark, can't be a red tail. Please, is it big enough? It is not. Oh, it's rough-legged. Really? That's offensive to me. This bird is nowhere big enough to be rough-legged. Black and white bands. Is it a red shoulder? It's not big enough. Red shoulders have cinnamon red color in here when they're adults. It's real obvious, as you'll see. Immature broadwing, one of the most difficult birds of prey to identify by sight. Crow size, has streaking on its chest, doesn't have the barring as an adult, it doesn't have a black and white tail. It has barring on there with dark brown and lighter color, but they don't have black and white. Very challenging bird to identify. Could it be an exhibitor? Oh, come on, that's offensive. You see yellow eye there? You see orange or red? No, it's not an exhibitor. Tail's not long enough. Toes aren't long enough either. Mammal eater mostly. They will eat toes, birds. Here's the dorsal side of those same birds. My brother Adam. Adult broadwing hawk on the left, in molt. Old feathers frayed a bit, new darker ones in here. There's a new tail feather coming in. Immature bird, first fall migration, broadwing hawk. Nice comparative shot. Jiminy crickets. Is this bird not? It is. It's like really nondescript, except for its size and its relatively large head. Could it be an accipitor? Really? I see enough eye, it's not yellow. This tail is too short to be an accipitor. It's too short proportionate. here is a disparate / comparative image, which I think shows quite nicely an accipiter tail, long and relatively narrow, compared to the short rounded tail of a broadwing hawk, immature, and an accipiter who has a noticeable yellow eye. Look at the bicolor. Yeah, there's bicolor in here, but see the cinnamon brown at the tip? This is a sharp shin, bird catcher, bird eater. Look at the length of the toe. This is an excellent, in my opinion, shot comparing a buteo body over the accipiter body, who also can be rather svelte compared to, well, most birds are rather svelte compared to a buteo. Buteos are blockers. Adult red-shouldered, Buteo lineatus. Not as big as a red tail. Here's a red shoulder. For size in my right hand, and here's a red tail in my left hand. The tail feathers are right about at the same place, so you can see the size difference between these two. And look at the lots of, and when we turn this bird over, this red shoulder is going to have lots of barring on the underside. Look at the tail, adult. This is a breeding bird, it's a female bird I caught in Oconto County, northeast of here. Black and white barring. Oh, could be an adult broadening. Too many bands, and they aren't broad enough. This band especially isn't broad enough to be a broadwing hawk. There's the shoulder. That's reddish tint, cinnamon red, squared off head, dark brown eye, typical buteo, but a red shouldered hawk. State threatened species, which we discussed under status assessment, population assessment in lecture module. In my opinion, ridiculous by the state of Wisconsin to list this bird. It's moved into cities recently. Many areas in eastern North America. Breeds out west, I might add, too. In California. Black and white tail, thin white band, reddish tint here, brown barring on the chest. 4 hawks, daytime birds of prey have barring. That's brown. Coopers, sharp-shinned, broadwinged, red shoulder, as aforementioned. This is an adult red shoulder. Lots of black and white in their secondaries and primaries. It's really like a crescent, a translucent crescent mark here in the outer reaches of the primaries, which actually shows up quite nicely when you see this bird flying about. Even in immature plumage, which I'm not holding you guys responsible for, that translucent crescent is a very noticeable feature of red-shouldered hawks. Red-shouldered hawk, adult. Cinnamon brown color, the red, chest, coverts, look up here, even up in here, black and white tail and black and white in the primaries and even into the secondaries. Buteo lineatus, which we discuss at length in lecture, so I won't reiterate those things here. See the crescent lines in the outer primaries? Adult red shoulder. This is our national bird. We are still in the family Accipiter Haliaeetus leucocephalus. It is an endemic North American, one of our 7-ish species of sea eagles on the planet Earth. So it's an aquatic eagle. It's a scavenger. It will take live fish, but mostly dead fish. Whitehead, whitetail, which is acquired at about 4 years of age, and a bill color change from black as a youngster in the first few years of its life to yellow. That is unusual when you get into upper latitudes. Tropics have a number of species of birds that have bill color changes. Very unusual in class aves when you get to upper latitudes on the planet Earth. These lower part of the legs tend to lack feathers because they reach into water and you want to get your feathers wet. The other eagle that occurs in North America, and the most widely distributed eagle on the planet Earth, holarctically distributed, is the golden eagle. They are similar in size, although golden eagles, females get a little bit bigger than female bald eagles. They're still really big, but feathers go all the way to the base of the toes. I've never seen a student miss this bird. I've seen some incredibly interesting spelling of its name, so you should practice to make sure you can recognize on the digital exams that'll come up, and otherwise a black body. But for the first 4 years of its life, it is uniformly dark throughout, including its beak. This is a bird that was placed on the endangered species list, and it's mostly been delisted throughout North America. It has made a phenomenal recovery throughout North America. DDT was a major culprit, and people usually have very little difficulty identifying this bird. It's a subadult bald bird, immature, where people become challenged. This is a bald eagle. It is probably a third-year bald eagle. This is my mentor again on the far left, Dave Evans. One of the best hawk trappers, rat trappers, in my opinion, on the planet that I've ever seen. One of the best bird handlers. I've often thought I learned from the best. His wife, Molly. This is the underwing proper. These are flight feathers. This is the wing proper. These are flight feathers. Bald eagles will tend to have white in here as they get in age through right around 3 and 4. In their first year of life, this will be all dark. These are covert feathers. Golden eagles will never have white in here ever. Not ever. Dark bill. Oh, it looks like a bicolored tail. Yeah, it kind of does. First year golden eagles have a bicolored tail. It's real similar to a rough-legged hawk. White, approximately dark distally. This looks like a bicolored tail. I admitted that it does. It's kind of the angle. I'm going to show you the north side, the dorsal side here in a moment. Third-year bald eagle. I don't expect you to know the year, but it's an immature. It's a subadult. Bald eagle. White on the wing proper underneath. No golden eagle will ever have that, no matter what age it's in. This is the tail of that bald eagle. It's actually modeled along the margin and up toward the body. This is a golden eagle, close-up of its head. Golden eagle is the most widely distributed eagle on the planet Earth. It is an incredibly important bird to indigenous peoples, to falconers in Mongolia and China, especially Mongolia. And it is regularly used. Thousands of falconers over there that hunt wolves with this. Goats, wild goats. It's named for the golden color here on the back side of the head. The bald eagle will never have this. Only the golden eagle will have that coloration. This is a close-up, of course. This is a female, and she's in her first year of life. A bird we caught at Hawk Ridge back in the mid-1970s. You can still see her golden feathers, her occipital region of her head that are golden, or golden hackle-like area right here. This is a very big bird. No white in the wing proper, but white in the first year in 3 places. The junction between the secondaries and the primaries, a white window between the primaries and the secondaries, and a bicolored tail. 3 places of white during the first year of life for Aquila cruceatus, the golden eagle, family Accipitridae. Be able to tell me the difference between the 2 eagles. These shots are wonderful pictures taken from the same distance on the ground to the flying bird. Golden eagle on the right, bald eagle on the left. Obviously not an adult. Bicolored tail, 3 areas of white, less of a head showing ahead of the leading edge of the wing. Why is that so? This head is larger. Why is that so? Because bald eagles are a fish-eating eagle, and they have a deep bill that has to be accommodated by a bigger head so they can rip off of scales off of fish. That's a hard job. They don't need such accoutrement morphologically. So the head is shorter in length. Tough characteristic to apply? You bet. Is it true? Absolutely. Absolutely. Golden eagle on the right, Bicolored tail, must be in its first year of life. Golden feathers on the back of the head. Bald eagle on the left, subadult or immature if you wish. Around year 4, there's actually a bit of an eye line. It can be tough to see on some birds, but if you get close to them, there's actually an eye line that develops, and I can see a bit of it. It's a little darker right in here, a little lighter above and a little darker below. Nonetheless, bald eagle on left, never golden feathers on the back of its head. Falcons. Different order, Falconiformes, at least as recognized by the American Ornithologists Union. And notice that osprey is out of order in your bird list with where I'm headed. That's okay, we'll pick up ospreys a little bit later. Drop down to Falconiformes. The falcons are in the family Falconidae. Falco, the genus Falco, means sickle, sickle shaped. It is referring to the highly tapered wing, which I'm going to show you in several different ways. To get that, they increase all the way out on their wing the length of the primaries. This is such an obvious feature of a falcon. This is a hobby falcon. It's not here in North America, but it doesn't matter. It's a falcon. Squared out head, large chocolate brown eyes, almost all falcons. There are about 63 species of falcons on the planet Earth. They have relatively short legs. They are renowned for stooping and hitting their prey, especially peregrines. And shorter legs, make sure that they probably are integrity rich, because if you have a long leg and you hit something, maybe it'll more readily break. Falcons have a much shorter leg, much shorter tarsus. Squared off head, large chocolate brown eyes. Many falcons are nocturnal. They will migrate at night. In fact, they will stay aloft for days on end in some species, the evidence suggests. And many claim they are either closely related to and should be a part of the strigiforms, the owls, because no falcon builds a nest. They hiss, for instance. But because of their mold and molecular constructs and some other features of their lives, they actually, a lot of taxonomists believe they should be with the Psittaciformes, which are the parrots of the world. Their mold is exactly like that of parrots, and unlike hawks. Here's the tapered wing, pointed wing, which allows them to, so in fact, our entire body is tapered. It's fusiform, tapered wings to reduce turbulence, so they can stoop at high speeds. The fastest moving vertebrate on the planet Earth is the peregrine falcon, over 200 miles an hour in a stoop. There is the sickle-shaped profile, the tapering of the wings. This is a peregrine, a female stooping on me at a study site in West Greenland. I'm going to have, 2 age classes for the gerfalcon, and we're going to add some pictures that show adult. In this particular instance, this particular picture is of a gerfalcon. This particular individual actually is an adult, but some of the colors are coming through as well as I'd like to show you. But here are some key things. Falcons tend to have tapered wings, irrespective of the species. Their bodies tend to be rather fusiform, but this is the largest falcon on the planet Earth, and it has a more blockish sized body. And so you get a feel for size, because I don't have a gerfalcon to show you as a mount. Gerfalcons are easily the size of a red-tailed hawk. This is a peregrine falcon. Gerfalcons are bigger than peregrines. Some female peregrines, this is a male peregrine, remember reverse size dimorphism in birds of prey. Some female peregrines would equal the size of a male ger, but I assure you, gers are much larger and blockier, more girth in their body proper, chest in their abdominal region. So this looks hefty for a falcon to me. This is a gerfalcon, the largest falcon on Earth. It is holarctically distributed all across Eurasia and North America, and it's a tundra breeding bird. And actually, peregrines can breed farther north than the gers can. Short legs, they have long toes. They will take mammalian prey, but they're bird catchers. ptarmigan is what they take. This region of the head, this area is called a malar area. Gyrfalcons will have a bit of a malar mark, but peregrines have way more of a malar mark. Way different. Adult gyrs will have barring on their chest. It won't be as completely barred across the entire girth as in a red shoulder or a broadman or a Cooper sock. But barring. Immatures will have vertical streaking. Adults will have yellow legs and toes, and they'll have a yellow cere, the naked part of the base of the beak. But youngsters will have a gray cere and gray toes. This is an adult gyrfalcon. Tundra breeding bird. This is the first gyr I ever saw and held. A bird we caught in 1974, I believe. Yeah, it was 1974 up at Duluth. It's a first-year bird. Many first-year daytime birds of prey have a bicoloration to the coverts, vertical streaking, blue-gray cere, little blue-gray tint to the bill too. But this would be yellow as an adult gyr. Large chocolate brown eye, falcon, squared off head, falcon, parrot-like bill, powerful bill falcon. If you read some of the conventional non-technical literature, it is often renowned that falcons have such a powerful bill, like that of a parrot, they can reach down and they can snap the cervical vertebrae of the neck of their prey, the cervical vertebrae as such. They probably kill mostly with their feet though, but they are biters. Anyone that has held a falcon, and this is Falco rusticolus, it's in the family Falconidae. It does not breed in the state of Wisconsin, but we do get gyrfalcons coming down in some winters. And we can get them at the Buena Vista Marsh, trying to catch ptarmigan-like prey chickens, and for that matter, sharp-tailed grouse. So this is an immature. I can see a little bit of the feet here. By the way, the legs are so short and gyrfalcons are so powerful that, and this bird did this, it rocks in your hand. It's very hard to hold on to them. Owls can have that problem with them too. Longer legs make it a little bit easier for a firmer grip. Beautiful animal indeed. Not much of a malar mark, whether it's an immature or an adult. They tend to lack that compared to that of a peregrine falcon, who is noticeably smaller than gyrfalcons. Gyrfalcons have polymorphism in their plumage. They can come in white. In fact, some males can be totally white. But they have this black-white color, suggestive of the coloring, and maybe not by coincidence, that snowy owls have, because they are found in similar places where it's very light colored and probably good camouflage. Not yellow legs, blue-gray cere. This is an immature bird. In fact, this is a fledgling gyrfalcon from our West Greenland study site who has lost a little bit of confidence, so we took it into captivity for a while, fed it up, and then eventually we were able to let it go. Squared off head, large chocolate brown eyes, sleep on the wing at night. No other bird on the planet Earth has an overwintering range the size of this animal, thousands of square miles, and in fact they will sleep on the air in the North Atlantic or in the Arctic Ocean, and they also will roost on icebergs. A bird that many are concerned about because of recent climate change, because the Arctic is warming 2 to 3 times faster than anywhere else on the planet Earth. Willows are moving farther north than where they used to be, ground willows, shrub willows, and that's better habitat for some kind of ptarmigan, willow ptarmigan, that they're not as well adapted to taking the, especially go after rock ptarmigan, for instance, and Arctic hare. So some are concerned that they might get decoupled from their optimal kind of prey. That remains to be seen. For current circumpolar status, which you guys will get assigned as a reading, of which I participated in, right now the data suggests that gyrfalcons are holding their own, that their population viability seems solid for the immediate future. Peregrine falcon, adult. Adult peregrine falcons have a blue-gray back. Doesn't matter whether it's a male or a female. This will be a browner color as an immature in the first year. Blue-gray back, very suggestive of the color we see on the back of an accipiter. Or for that matter, an adult male Circus hudsonicus, a northern harrier. Look at the extent of the malar mark, yellow cere, yellow eye ring, and if I could turn this bird around, I guarantee it'd have yellow legs and yellow toes. Adult peregrine, Falco peregrinus. Peregrine means to wander. One of the most widely distributed vertebrate species and birds on the planet Earth, along with the osprey and the barn owl. They breed on all continents, does this particular species. If you look closely in the nostril, there's a bony tubercle, T-U-B-E-R-C-L-E, T-U-B-E-R-C-L-E. It is speculated that that bony tubercle acts as a baffle to help them breathe while they're moving at fast distances. Go ahead and stick your head out of a car window when you're going 60 miles an hour into, if you will, holding your head forward into the wind. You will suffocate. And if these birds are stooping for several minutes from on high, some claim that they could too suffocate if they didn't have a way to allow air to still come in. It's a hypothesis. Interesting hypothesis. Adult peregrines ventrally have barring on their chest. They will have streaking in their first year, barring once they are adults. And here's the barring. It doesn't go all the way. It goes most of the way, certainly about 3/4 of the ventral. Very prominent malar, M-A-L-A-R. M-A-L-A-R. Malar marks, almost like they have like straps, if you will. Yellow cere, yellow eye ring. Can't see the legs quite well here. Blue-gray back. There's an adult female in West Greenland with her puppies who are only a few days old. Peregrine. First fall migration. Still quite a substantial malar mark. Immature. Blue-gray, blue-gray, blue-gray. Streaking. Bicolored coverts. Immature bird. Immature bird. Peregrines exhibit lots of different subspecies. 3 in North America. Falco peregrinus anatum, which was the subspecies wiped out by DDT over the eastern half of the continent. Falco peregrinus anatum, and you also have Falco peregrinus tundrius, and then you have Falco peregrinus pelei. Pelei is restricted to what used to be the Charlotte Islands off the Pacific Northwest coast. It's starts with an H. I can't think of the name. Tundrius are blondish in their color, especially near their heads as their first year, light colors, blondies. Anatoms were darker and have more of a salmon color, especially as adults, orangish tint on their chest. Nonetheless, molecular recent evidence suggests that the subspecies designation is not valid. Molecularly, they are all the same, especially Tundrius and anatum. Nonetheless, AOU recognizes the subspecies. Peregrine, long toes, they have short legs, they are a bird catcher. Vertical streaking, this bird is darker in color, probably not from the tundra, could be, but much darker chest. Vertical streaking, bicolored covert feathers, blue-gray, not yellow legs, not yellow eye ring. This is an immature peregrine. It's a male, I might add. Smaller. Merlins. Some people will say Merlin falcon. Technically, it is a merlin. It is much smaller than a peregrine. This is a male. This is an adult male peregrine. This is a merlin. Look at how much smaller the merlin is. And if I had a kestrel falcon in my hand, the kestrel would be very similar to the merlin. So you really have 2 large falcons, Falco peregrinus and Falco rusticolus, and then Falco columbarius and Falco sparvarius. The latter 2 are the small ones. In the east, this is a holarctically distributed species. Breeds in Wisconsin and is now urbanized, and it breeds here in several pairs, half a dozen pairs most likely here in Stevens Point. Look at the elongated primaries until you get to the 10th one. That's always a little shorter, but these ones get longer and longer and longer. In the eastern half of North America, Merlins are dark brown. Adult males have a blue-gray tint, but otherwise you're looking at a brown bird. Large chocolate brown eye, very dark dorsum here with some light brown lines here. Adult male will have a little bit of white in here. And always, doesn't matter the sex, and it doesn't matter the age, a light supercilium line. A light supercilium line. Usually a light brown. Bird catcher. Waxwings, house sparrows, starlings even to some extent. Always streaking, never any barring. Doesn't matter the age. Look at the light supercilium line above the eye. Large chocolate brown eye, parrot-like bill, long toes, bird catcher, Merlin. I love these sexy white circles in the coverts that you see on a Merlin falcon. If you go to the western area of, or the central west part of our continent in the prairie states and provinces, it's called the Richardson's Merlin. It's a subspecies, and it's light brown. It's a sandy wash, like sand on a beach, but much darker here in the northern, or excuse me, eastern side of the continent. This is the color of Merlins that breed here in Stevens Point. Falco columbarius, Falconidae is the family. Different order of things. There's a puppy that's fledged. You can still see some down on the top of its head, but even at this age, look at the light brown supercilium line. And the mantle on a bird's body is the center of the upper back. That's this area right here. Merlins never have barring in here. Why do I tell you that? Because the kestrel falcon will have barring in here, never on a Merlin. Kestrels, like the northern harrier, Circus axonicus, sexual dichromatism. Apparent, obvious, even in the first summer of life. Here's a male. They will always have the blue-gray shoulder. Females will never have that. Falco sparvarius will always have barring in the upper part of the back, the center of the upper, the mantle. Merlins will never have that. Large chocolate brown eyes. Females have more barring across the tail feathers. Males lack the barring. The underside, males will be more white, and she'll have a lighter brown rather than the white that the male has. Kestrels have 3 black markings. You can't say they're all on the side. 2 streaks and a single black occipital mark. 2 streaks and a circular black occipital mark. You go to this side, 2 streaks, black occipital mark. Females will have that too, so will males. The Merlins aren't going to have these 3 black. Jurors will not, neither will peregrines. Low wing loading, soaring, go like this. It can hover, not just soar a lot, it'll hover an awful lot because it's so low wing loaded. So watch for small mammals or snakes or insects and then fly down and stoop. Much lower wing loaded. They will eat dragonflies. In fact, this male, hard for you guys to see, there's some exoskeleton of a dragonfly that it must have recently become. Nests and cavities. No falcon builds its own nest. Nest on the ground or a pre-made structure, a cavity. The cavity is the preferred substrate of all members of Class 80s, irrespective of taxa. If you can get into a cavity and be out of vision of a predator, that is your best, if you will, strategy. And it's one of the reasons why cavity nesting is such a prevalent feature. And that's also one of the reasons why erecting nest boxes will assist and augment a population of kestrels, as Fran Hammerstrom, the late great Fran Hammerstrom, markedly displayed in a paper she published in the Journal of Wildlife Management in 1973. Kestrel, male. You are responsible for being able to distinguish between a male and a female. because it is relatively easy to do such. Lacking of barring, much lighter color here. This is the male kestrel. That reddish brown color is a very obvious feature on the back and the tail, especially in the male, but also in the female. Adult male kestrel, hovering. Two different falcons, similar in size. Merlin on top. Look at the thin light brown supercilium line. Kestrel. 3 markings that I just indicated. What sex is this? That's too dark to be a male, and there's too many bands down here. This is a female Falcospirarius, Falcocolumbarius. So nice comparative shot. No bar marks in the mantle of a merlin. Merlin's on the bottom, kestrel on top. Sex of the top bird is a female kestrel, because she doesn't have any blue-gray on her shoulders. Please take note, when I test you on identification, visual so digitally on your Canvas exams, I will never use a picture I have shown you in these 2 units where I've covered ID. So don't memorize the picture, memorize the attributes. Don't memorize the picture, memorize the attributes. I will never use the same picture that you were shown. Falcon versus a hawk. Merlin falcon on the left. Light brown supercilium line, large chocolate brown eye. Streaking, always the case on a merlin. Sharp-shinned hawk, cinnamon brown on the tip of the coverts. I can see a bit of yellow eye, brown streaking. This must be small. This is a small. This can't be a peregrine or gerfalcon. Are you kidding me? There would be a mallard marking here. And you wouldn't have a yellow cere like this, which you typically see on a merlin. You might see a yellow cere on a ger or a peregrine, but then who would this be? I mean, who could this possibly be? Merlin falcon, the thin brown line gives it away. Falcon, the large chocolate brown eye gives it away. Notice the more noticeable bony turbicle that tends to be lacking in a hawk. Yellow eye. Young Sharpies do tend to have a supercilium line on them. Merlin versus a sharpshin. Hawk wing versus a falcon wing. Wings of falcons are thinner, so they can slice through the air. The distance from here to here is thinner than this. This is a sharpshin. It's adult. It's got brown barring. It has an orange to red eye. Merlin, larger eye, chocolate brown eye, squared off head, thin brown line. Merlin. Tapered wing, rounded wing, wider wing, sprint flyer. Rough grouse you probably encounter. They're very fast over short distances. That's the way this wing is built. This is a grouse wing. They're a sprinter. Lastly, ospreys. Ospreys are big. They're quite big. They are an aquatic species that is distributed across all continents except Antarctica. They are catchers and hunters of live fish prey rather than bald eagles going after dead. And by the way, eagles will kleptoparasitize. That means to steal fish out of the air from ospreys. Ospreys have very long wings. How do I know that? Well, in the field, you can actually see it. They have pretty long wings. In fact, their wings are so big, the wrist is really far out on their wing. And it's almost like they flap twice with each flap. The wing is so big that when they bring the wing into the body, the wrist sticks out in front of the chest. Right there. Clearly a long-winged bird. Now, please take note. Of daytime birds of prey, yes, they're a challenge, but I have to tell you, it is not an uncommon thing to see people miss goshawks for osprey. And I think it's because they see the eye line, which goshawks have, and there's a yellow or orange eye, and they get confused between the goshawk and an osprey. Please. No accipiter has such a long wing that the wrist sticks out in front. Under normal circumstances, you would never see such a thing. The flight feathers, look at the primaries, how far back they go as far back as the tail. A goshawk wing's flight feathers would end right in here. This is clearly a soaring raptor. Goshawks are not soaring raptors. And they have a brown back. They don't have a blue-gray back when you compare adults. Look at how far the wrist is out on the wing. This is amazing. These are remarkable birds for their ability to hover. The wrist is here. On a goshawk, the wrist would be right about here, FYI. Goshawks are much lighter colored underneath here. They have a light to a speckled crown or top of their head with a brown eye line. Adults have yellow eyes, nestlings have orange eyes. Adults have yellow eyes, nestlings have orange eyes. It's like the reverse of accipiters, who start out yellow and turn orange or red. These guys start orange, never red, orange, and they turn yellow. They have relatively long legs. They have, as discussed, I think it's one of my lecture facets for the class. They have, like owls, they have a reversible fourth toe. They can move it backwards to help them grab on. And they have lots of pads on the underside of their feet that help them grip slippery prey like fish. A bird like the bald eagle that was in trouble, as with Cooper's hawks and a variety of other species because of DDT, that got bioaccumulated physiologically. Deep bill, like that of a sea eagle, deep, breaking apart fish scales. It's in the family Pandionidae. It's in the family Pandionidae. Not in Accipitridae, but it is in the Accipitriformes. Pandion haliaetus. Look where the wrist is. This is an osprey way out here. Very light colored underneath, light colored head, and an eye line, which is brown. Very common species. We have several pairs that breed down along the Medill Pond area and many other areas and ponds here in the Stevens Point area. Look where the wrist sticks out in front of the chest. Look at the deepness of the bill. Look how arched it looks. It's deep. It's a fish-eating bill if ever there was one. Orange eyes as youngsters, nestlings, and then turns yellow. Look at the bicoloring of the covert feathers, typical of so many first-year birds of prey, especially daytime birds of prey. They will never have this light color at the tip. 3 birds here. This nest is about this far above the Wisconsin River. It's a platform built right just outside of the water. So very close to planet Earth. My dad in the front and my mentor in the back. And they are holding a Cooper's hawk, Brown Barring. Golden eagle. Golden eagle. No white, it's an adult. This is the first eagle I ever caught in my lifetime. I was all alone when I caught this. I never caught a big bird of prey in my life, and I was scared to death to free it from the trap that I had it ensnared it in. One of these birds is bald eagle, and one of them is a golden eagle. Given the things that I've just told you, how would I separate those two? Look at the base of the leg, right where the toes, if you will, start. Who's got the feathers coming down to the toes? Golden eagles do. In fact, there are other kinds of eagles on planet Earth that have feathers like that, and they call them booted eagles because they have feathers going down. That's a colloquial phrase. Look at the lack of feathers on the subadult bald eagle on the left. By the way, this is probably a female golden eagle on the right. And we also know her age. She is in her first year of life. How do I know that? Because she has white here. She has white over here. And she has a bicolored tail. And I hope I can show you this. This is a subadult bald eagle. Boom. No feathers. No golden hackles back here. This bird has that, but I want to show you this. Let's see if I can do this without hurting the bird. Look at the back toe, guys. And look at the length of the talon on the halix toe, which is the rearward projecting toe. Look at the length, proportionately speaking, of that talon versus the talon of this eagle. And what really accounts for the major difference? Not so much because this might be a male on the left bald eagle and a female golden eagle, which would account for some of it. But the reason is because this guy, the golden eagle, kills live prey. They use these talons to catch wolves, which are dangerous. And these toes have talons that are longer also. And if you are a bird of prey and you're catching something dangerous, even if it's not dangerous, you grab the head. Inexperienced raptors, when they're first catching stuff, don't realize they got to get the head. And if they sink those talons inside the head of a prey species, especially in the eye sockets, that animal may not die right away, but is not going anywhere. This is an impressive set of killing features, and they use for defense, and talons are used for catching, and talons are used for carrying. But the length of them, can you imagine the selective pressure over the thousands of years that it's taken to craft this kind of animal? How important it would be to have those things in such a manner that they are strongly adaptive for killing things that could hurt you in turn. So this guy scavenges mostly, and he doesn't have quite the need for such long talons. I'm not suggesting those aren't powerful. They are, but these are a horse of a different color. They really are. One last remark. This bird was killed by grandma back in the day. We got this, it was sitting in a family's basement for decades, and it was a woman who was walking on an old railroad grade, either in Marathon County or Portage County, as I recall, and she got attacked by this first-year golden eagle. So the story goes, and she picked a stick up and killed it. And maybe the golden eagle was starving, thought grandma was frail and could catch it. Go Nana. P.S. guys, these are all immature forms or immature age class of the genus Accipiter here in North America. So here are sharp-shinned hawks. Here's a female, here's a male. Remember, they have a thin supercilium line when they're immature birds. This is a Cooper's hawk. Notice it's a bigger size head, in fact, a little bit more squared off. And this is a goshawk. So a nice array of the size disparity, all at their first year of life. Vertical brown streaking, long tails, long toes, yellow eyes in their first year. And goshawks, of course, as adults, have a prominent supercilium line as adults. Even some immature birds will have a supercilium line. Look at the massive change of size between Sharpies, between Coops, and goshawks. In Eurasia, they have a goshawk, and they have what is known as a Eurasian sparrowhawk, which we talk about under lifetime reproductive success in a module of lecture. The Eurasian sparrowhawk is intermediate in size between Sharpies and Coops, and they have a goshawk. They do not have 3 accipiters in Europe. They have 2. They have a goshawk and a Eurasian sparrowhawk. We have 3 species. Once again, male Sharpie, female Sharpie, Accipiter striatus, Accipiter cooperi, Accipiter gentilis. If they all survive to the next year, orange or red eyes, brown barring, black barring, and the backs would all be blue-gray. Cooper's hawk would have a noticeable cap of dark blue-gray, almost black on it. So a nice array of immature categories.